This episode is brought to you by HASA. Liquid is clearly better. Liquid chlorine is the highest purity, works immediately, has no added cyanuric acid or calcium, and it will leave your pool safe, clean, and clear. And by the Bottom Feeder professional grade battery powered vacuum system. It sucks to clean pools, so cleaning pools sucks less. Get $100 off with code DVB100.
This episode is brought to you by Skimmer, the #1 pool service software in North America. With Skimmer, you can streamline your schedule, grow your revenue, and keep your customers coming back with 5-star service. Whether you're a one-person operation or an established team, Skimmer is your partner in success. Visit getskimmer.com/poolguy to try Skimmer for free for 30 days.
The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show.
Hi, welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. In this episode, I'm going to talk to you about an end of an era in pool cleaners, and that is Pentair retiring the Kreepy Krauly cleaner. And of course, the Kreepy Krauly has been around for over 50 years. And if you've been in the industry as long as I have, it's probably one of the first cleaners you've ever ran into. And of course, Pentair is discontinuing that cleaner. Are you a pool service pro looking to take your business to the next level? Join the Pool Guy coaching program. Get expert advice, business tips, exclusive content, and get direct support from me. I'm a 35-year veteran in the industry. Whether you're starting out or scaling up, I've got the tools to help you succeed. Learn more at swimmingpoollearning.com. The Kreepy Krauly actually is something that's kind of iconic in the industry, and Pentair came out with this thing. Well, actually, it was invented by someone in South Africa, and I believe Pentair bought the patent. Like a lot of manufacturers will buy the actual product from someone else who created it, and they market it. If you ever had one of the white units, it's one of the older ones. It was like a white unit that had screws in it, and it was pretty similar to the older Kreepy Krauly Classic that's been around for a long time. And then I think about 10 or 12 years ago, they came out with the new Kreepy Krauly model, and it's a pretty robust cleaner. You can keep changing parts in it. I find that out of the bouncing cleaners, it's the one that picked up the largest debris because it had this flapper in the mouth or hammer, and it was made out of this hard rubber, and it would pick up large debris with no problem, like acorns, things like that. And so it was pretty good for that, for pools with large debris, but it was a bouncing type cleaner. And the concept behind the bouncing type cleaners were that the bouncing motion of the cleaners were going to make motion on the surface, which they do, and it's going to knock debris down to the bottom, and they can pick up the debris. So it was kind of a twofold design. Part of it, bouncing, was knocking debris down to the bottom, and the other part was being able to pick up the debris from the bottom of the pool and keep the pool clean. So it technically would clean the surface with the bouncing motion and the floor of the pool. And the problem with the bouncing type cleaners is that there really is no guidance. What I mean by that is that it's pretty random. It'll bounce around the pool basically. Sometimes the water jets will cause it to move a certain way, but mainly it's just going to do a random pattern bouncing around the pool, and it may miss the same spot pretty much forever. I had this pool on my route that was a triangle shaped pool. The only one I ever had that was shaped this way. It was kind of weird. It was in the backyard, and it was shaped like a triangle basically with coping around it. So it wasn't like a sharp edge pool, but it had the shape of a triangle, and it had a Kreepy Krauly in there. And every week it would miss the same exact 8-inch by 12-inch, actually triangle shaped, believe it or not, area in the pool. And no matter what I did, it would always miss that one area because it's a random type cleaner. Now the gear type cleaners, there's no actual computer chip in there. There's nothing in a gear type cleaner that's going to make it think or map the pool, but the gear type suction side cleaners do have gears in it, and depending on which cleaner, I'll just talk about the Hayward pool cleaner or the Hayward Aquanaut just to give you an idea. So how this works is that there's a lot of gears in there that are turning, and then there's a cam, a larger cam or larger plastic piece, they call it the cam, has notches in there. So as all these gears are turning in the cleaner like a watch basically, and your watch is, if you have a mechanical watch, the gears are turning and it's making the hands move. Well, the same thing with the gear type cleaner. All these gears are turning as it's moving with the suction of the pool, off of the pool suction. And when it gets to a certain point, so with the Hayward pool cleaner, or Aquanaut if you want to call it that, it basically will go about 10 feet, and then the cam will lock up on one side. So the larger piece of plastic with the notches will lock onto the shaft, and then the wheel will spin on one side while the other side is locked, and that's how it kind of turns and pivots in the pool. So there's no brain inside the gear type cleaners, but they are much better at navigating the pool because they have kind of this timed mechanism in there, and the pattern is probably less random because of that. And the fact that they can actually turn out of step areas with the gears turning makes it superior to the bouncing type cleaners, which can get hung up on the step area. So the reason why I describe this to you, and the reason you should know this, is that the gear type cleaners are much more superior than the bouncing type cleaners. And I just think the bouncing type cleaners like the Kreepy Krauly kind of met their match. Their day has ended, and the gear type cleaners are far superior. Now, where the bouncing type cleaners excel in a pool is in the surface type. So if there's a fiberglass or vinyl pool, you definitely would want to get a Zodiac G3 or Zodiac Ranger for those pools because they do a lot better with the slick surfaces of the wall. They do a lot better climbing the walls in a vinyl pool, in-ground vinyl pool, I should say. I'm not talking about an above-ground vinyl pool, I should state that. But in an in-ground vinyl pool, the bouncing type cleaners do get more coverage of the pool just by the nature of how they operate with the disc on the bottom and how they can bounce around the pool a lot better than a gear type cleaner, which has trouble climbing vinyl walls and fiberglass walls, and the bouncing type cleaners have no problem with the walls of the pool. Now for an above ground pool, it doesn't really matter because the bouncing type cleaners can't climb that sheer wall. It's got to be some kind of incline for them to get up there, nor can the gear type cleaners climb that sheer wall that in an above ground pool. So that's the main difference between the gear type cleaners. Of course, the Hayward Navigator is a gear type cleaner as well, and the Zodiac MX8 Elite, and also the Polaris Atlas and Max cleaner. What I find interesting about Pentair discontinuing the Kreepy Krauly, let's see, it's called, let me get the exact number here. It's important because they changed it, and it's called the 360040. That's the model number. 36042, 36046, and 36049. All those have been discontinued. And that was the newer Kreepy Krauly, the newer version. What I find interesting is that Pentair actually discontinued a lot of their cleaners. If you go to their website and type in automatic cleaners, you'll see that quite a lot of their cleaners have been discontinued. And I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that Pentair never was a big seller of these cleaners. Other companies like Hayward and Zodiac really dominated the market with their suction side cleaners and their robotic pool cleaners. In fact, if you go to the Hayward site, you'll see the Pentair Prowler 930, and this is actually a Dolphin robot. So they just slapped the Pentair label on there, and Dolphin actually makes all the Pentair robotic pool cleaners because Pentair never developed. One of their greatest regrets when I talk to people internally is that Pentair never developed a robotic pool cleaner. They just used Dolphin basically to make their cleaner, put the Pentair label on, and called it a day, which is a shame because with all that money, they probably could have made a really good robotic pool cleaner. Now, the Pentair Rebel is still available. The Pentair Kreepy Krauly Platinum is a pressure side cleaner that's still available showing on their site. Interesting, the Kreepy Krauly Cruiser, which I thought was inferior to the Kreepy Krauly itself. I never really liked the Cruiser. I found that it was really touchy, hard to set up, didn't clean nearly as well as the Kreepy Krauly, but it did have the silent flapper in there, so it didn't make that noise. So the Kreepy Krauly, of course, made the classic click, 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 click sound as it worked in the pool, especially if you had an all-cement deck and you had nothing there. It would just make that clicking noise, and it would drive some people crazy, the click, 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 click all day long. So the Kreepy Krauly Cruiser has a silent flapper. I can still hear it, but it's nowhere near as loud as the Kreepy Krauly standard cleaner. They also discontinued the Pentair Racer, which had a few problems with it. If you had one in the pool, you would know that there are some internal parts that were very fragile. The Kreepy Krauly Legend has been discontinued as well. I'm not sure why they would discontinue the Legend and keep the Platinum. I thought the Legend was a pretty good cleaner. The Platinum is just a little bit more robust, I guess. They also discontinued the Kreepy Krauly Great White, which is the same as the Dorado. The Dorado has a blue body, but the Great White has been discontinued. The Kreepy Krauly Legend 2 has been discontinued. The Pentair Racer LS Pressure Side Cleaner has been discontinued. The Kreepy Krauly Prowler 820. One of the weirdest ones that I thought, and something that you don't see a lot of, is the Kreepy Krauly Sand Shark. This was kind of like a mix between a Navigator and the Great White, and of course that's been discontinued as well, so no need going into detail about it. It's just kind of a weird cleaner. The Kreepy Krauly Warrior has been discontinued. That was white version of the Rebel, which is for certain retail outlets. The thing that I think a lot of pool guys are going to be disappointed in is that the Pentair Little Rebel has been discontinued. This is great for small pools. It was like 1/3 the price of the Kreepy Krauly Rebel, and it worked great in smaller pools. It's technically made for an above ground pool, but a lot of pool pros use this in in-ground pools, so that one's discontinued. And then the Kreepy Krauly Easy Vac, which is for above ground pools, has been discontinued. And then a couple of the older Dolphin models, the Pentair Prowler 917 and the Kreepy Krauly Prowler 830, have been discontinued. So really, they've really slimmed down the line of cleaners. I just read probably like a dozen cleaners that have been discontinued. All they really have for suction side cleaners now is the Pentair Rebel, the Pentair Dorado, and the Kreepy Krauly Cruiser. All three of these are, I would say, inferior to the Hayward Pool Cleaner, Aquanaut, also inferior to the Polaris Max and Atlas cleaners, which are better cleaners. So if the market dictates that you can't sell your cleaners, they're not really moving, the price point isn't great, and people aren't buying the units, of course discontinuing them is a way to alleviate a product line that's losing money for your company, basically. So that's probably why they slimmed down. I don't think people were out there buying the Kreepy Krauly anymore or buying the Pentair pressure side cleaners. I believe Hayward stopped their pressure side cleaner as well, because no one can compete with Polaris, the Polaris 280, the Polaris 380, the Polaris 360, the Polaris 3900 Sport, and the Polaris, I can't remember the other one, but it's the 4-wheel version, Quattro. I was drawing a blank there. Not sure why. You can't compete against someone who has an entrenched market share. And I think robotic pool cleaner sales have also hurt suction side cleaner sales in a way. But it's a shame to see so many Pentair cleaners leaving the market. And I'm sure they'll still sell parts for them. But it is a shame because a lot of the ones they discontinued actually worked really well. I mentioned the Sand Shark was kind of a weird cleaner, but it was effective. It bounced and it kind of cleaned the walls a little bit better than a Navigator. By the way, the person that made the Hayward Pool Cleaner Aquanaut Phoenix, or Pool Vernugan if you go way back where I started, he actually designed the Sand Shark, the Great White, and the Hayward Navigator. So a lot of his creations have been discontinued at this point. Bottom line is that if they can't sell their product, they don't market their product, discontinuing it is what they have to do. So if you're looking for a suction side cleaner, where do you go? I have been mentioning off and on the Hayward Pool Cleaner, Aquanaut Phoenix. They're the same cleaner. They're just marketed to different segments. They're designed a little bit different on the shell and color. It's a really great cleaner. It has gears in it, like I mentioned. It's smart. It won't be as effective in a vinyl or fiberglass pool, but for a cement, gunite, PebbleTech pool, they work great. I do like the new Polaris Atlas and Max cleaners. I think the new Halo turbine makes them superior to a lot of these cleaners that Pentair discontinued. So I would say if I was getting a suction side cleaner and I didn't have a vinyl or fiberglass pool, I would definitely go with the Hayward Pool Cleaner or the Polaris Max or Atlas cleaner. If you have one of those anti-vortex main drains on the bottom, you know, the main drain that looks like a vegetable strainer, you definitely would want to go with the Polaris Atlas or the Polaris Max Cleaner. They have the largest body or footprint basically, so they're not going to get stuck on that drain. Sometimes some of the Hayward pool cleaners will get stuck on the drain, so I'd be leery about using those in a pool with one of those anti-vortex main drains. But you can't go wrong with them. They're great products, and I really think if you are going to get a suction side cleaner, Polaris makes a great one, Hayward makes a great one. In fact, the Hayward Navigator is still the number one selling suction side cleaner, followed by the Hayward pool cleaner. And then, of course, Zodiac and Polaris have another big share of the market. Now, why aren't I recommending the Hayward Navigator? I'm just not a big fan of it. I think the pool cleaner is better. The Navigator does have its fans in the desert. They love how it picks up the dirt. Arizona, Nevada, a lot of Navigators there. I just don't really like him because you're rebuilding him and they're a parts hog. And they're not as reliable as the other cleaners I mentioned. They're not a bad cleaner, so if you can find one on sale somewhere, pick up the Hayward Navigator. It's not something that I would advise you not to purchase. I just think the other cleaners are better, but the Hayward Navigator does have its place in the market, and it's a really popular cleaner. Navigator / pool vac, depending on which region you're in. Hayward has 2 different versions as well. Kind of confusing, but if you're on the East Coast, it's the pool vac. West Coast is the Hayward Navigator. Same cleaner, different color body, but you get the idea. And a lot of manufacturers do this to capture different market shares. They'll have a cleaner that's exactly the same but named differently for online sales versus retail sales. But basically, you can figure it out by looking at it that they're the same exact cleaner. So those are my recommendations for you. And with Pentair discontinuing a lot of their cleaners, I understand that. I get it. The market is not there for them anymore. And they'd rather focus on their pool equipment and not waste any more revenue on the cleaners that just weren't selling or taking up shelf space in their warehouses. And they were just bleeding money probably on those particular cleaners that they discontinued. Couldn't keep up with the competition from Hayward, Polaris, Zodiac. And so I guess getting out of the game is smart in some respect, but kind of sad for those of us who have been around the Kreepy Krauly for the last 50 years. And, you know, some people actually love that cleaner. I tolerated it. I think it was a pretty good cleaner, and I recommended it for pools with heavy debris, vinyl and fiberglass pools. It worked great in. So it wasn't a terrible cleaner. It just, the time has passed for the Pentair Kreepy Krauly. If you're looking for other podcasts, you can find those by subscribing to my YouTube channel. I put a podcast up Monday through Friday there. Also on my website, if you go to swimmingpoollearning.com, on the banner, there's a podcast icon. Click on that. There'll be a menu of podcasts there for you as well. And if you're interested in the coaching program that I offer, you can learn more at poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great rest of your week, and God bless. This episode is brought to you by HASA, providing products that deliver clean, healthy water for every aspect of everyday life. The bottom feeder battery-powered vacuum system, portable, powerful, and only weighs 12 pounds. And Skimmer. Get Skimmer, America's #1 pool service software. Podcast listeners can try Skimmer for free at getskimmer.com/poolguy.